Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Mark from SolarGames. Today we're going to talk all about inverted EVs. If you don't know what that means, you got to stay around the video to kind of find out. If you know what that is, still, it's always good to have a refresher, and I always have things to bring up again from my perspective that a lot of my viewers enjoy. So I hope it's a good one. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started. So inverted EVs. I think the first thing we're going to talk about is a definition for what that means, right? In general, EV stands for expected value, which is in mathematic or probabilistic term, it just means that with probability built in, you're expecting this much out of something, right? A good example of this is like if I flip a coin and it's 50% heads, 50% tails. If I flip two coins, my expected value of number of heads and tails is going to be 1 and 1. Okay, just so you can think about it that way. It's not always true. If you ever flip coins, you know that if you flip two coins, you could get two heads or two tails or whatever combination, right? But again, your expected value is 1 and 1. And the larger the number goes, like I flip 1,000 coins, 1,000,000 coins, whatever, the closer you get to your expected value, okay, right? Just so you understand how probability works. In the card space, expected value is how much you're expecting to get out of a booster box. So you take a sealed booster box like this sorcery here, and then you look at all the possible cards that you can get out of this box of sorcery, a little dust here, right? And you add up you sum up all the total of like all the cards and their value, and then of course you do some math to figure out the probability of a rare, a super rare, an ultra rare, whatever drop rates, and the value of those, and then you figure out exactly what a booster box can hold. Like 36 packs equates, for example, maybe 30 rares, 6 SRs, etc. So you have these kind of calculation, right? It's different for every game because every game packages their products differently. But effectively, if you know enough about how the boxes are configured, you kind of have an idea, and you could get a pretty good number of what we call expected value, EV. Okay, so that's what an EV of a booster box is. But what's an inverted EV? Now, an inverted EV is basically the situation whereby the expected value of a booster box is actually more than the booster box itself, right? So when you think about expected value, right, what you're usually going to get is something like this. A booster box, let's say, we'll take, what's a good magic set that's good? Okay, Fire Exterior All will be 1, right? Take Fire Exterior All will be 1 as a booster box. Let's take just simply the draft booster box. It's currently on the market for like about, let's say, 110, right? Your EV for the box is usually around like 120, like around 110, maybe a little bit less, like 108, 105, etc., right? That kind of stuff. That's basically what you're looking at. About the same, especially for sets that are in print in general, if they're readily available, the EV and the actual price of the booster box will equilibrate because if there's any invertness or whatever, then one side kind of can go the other side. A good example of this is if the cards are too expensive, more stores open booster boxes, which drive down the price, and vice versa, right? If there's too much, the booster boxes are too expensive, the card prices will rise up because, I'll just buy the singles, and the single market depletes supply and then equilibrates. So in general, you'll see this like situation. Inverted EV happens whereby like your booster box, right, is for some reason costs less sealed than the cards inside the booster box, right? Normally, right? So inverted EV is not normal. What's normal is that over a long period of time, as sealed booster boxes kind of go out of print, there's no more available in the market, or there's no more production of them. There's still going to be supply, but the supply dwindles as more players open them. You'll see something called just a normal standard, like booster boxes sealed will be worth more than the cards inside, the expected value. A good example of this is if you ever look at like Magic Gathering, alpha, beta sets, or even unlimited or revised, you'll notice that the booster boxes sealed are worth more than the expected value of the cards inside, right? Why is this? Because there's something called a gambler's premium. There's also something called, basically, the alpha booster box sealed is more rare than, for example, getting the Black Lotus. It's kind of, right? It's even though you're not even guaranteed a Black Lotus from that booster box, it's still more rare because it's a sealed. And it's a one-way trip, right? So a booster box can be open, but it can't be unopened unless you're a scammer. Then you can unopen all the booster boxes, right? And sell them to Logan Paul. So that's fine. But, like effectively, once you open a booster box, it gets, from sealed to unsealed. That is there is a premium in there. We call it the gambler's premium. And the idea here is like a gambler, somebody who's willing to kind of take that risk, is willing to pay a little extra to be able to open the booster box, right? And of course, nowadays with YouTube, with whatever content, and the booster box opening, technically, I can actually monetize me opening booster boxes. So there is actually extra value in opening something old, right? So there's that. And the last thing is, there's just a low supply. So every alpha booster box that gets open means there's one less available sealed ever. And Wizards of the Coast, unless they're doing shady stuff, will never reprint alpha. And I can guarantee you they're never going to be able to, because the plastic, the paper, all that stuff is gone. Like that's 30, 32 years ago. It's gone. They can't just remake that stuff. It's not actually possible. So that's in general what happens. So inverted EV, again, is where the booster box is lower price, sealed, than the actual expected value of the cards inside the booster box. Again, this situation happens, and the really good example of this happening recently is actually Mercurial Hearts from Grand Archive. So Mercurial Heart expansion of Grand Archive had an inverted EV issue. For a long time, you could just open booster boxes and you get more out of the booster box themselves than what you're paying for the sealed product. And it was just like a paradise for any store, because they can just mass box opening and they could get what they need. Now again, EV is not value, it's expected value, which means, yes, of course you can open a box of Mercurial Heart and have like really bad pulls, and sure, the value of what you paid could be less, but over, again, large numbers, it will be higher, right? Because your EV is going to be higher. So this is an inefficiency in the market, and it is actually temporary, right? So the first thing we want to tackle is, why does this happen? Why does any of these inverted EV situation happen? The general reason is because markets are localized and we're selling a physical good. What I mean by this is like, hey, maybe there are booster boxes that are sealed in Asia, right? Like maybe where the game is created. That nobody's opening, nobody's buying. So the price is kind of low. But we have ran out of cards inside America, and there's a big player base who need the cards, right? Backup Charger is a good example here, where lots of players need a specific card from a set, and we just can't get enough of it. So we have no more boxes here. So locally, right, even though the booster box can be purchased from, like, let's say, I don't know, Hong Kong for, let's say, $80. Again, that's not true. I'm just using this example, right? There's no more boxes here, which pumps up the actual like pricing of the singles. The other reason is also like, some players, whatever, they don't want to take the risk, right? If I'm looking for a playset of whatever, let's say ultra rare. I mean, do you know how many boxes you have to open to get a playset of some sort of ultra rare, like Vampiric Slime or something else? You actually have to open quite a bit of product, right? And in those cases where, yes, your EV is good, well, you don't run a store. Unless you're going to convert your cards, you're still going to have a lot of cards that's not the card you're looking for. So this is why, even with inverted situations, the general recommendation is you still should buy singles. I often will tell people the only time when you need singles, when you need playable cards that you should open booster boxes, is when there's a lot of cards you're looking for. Not just one or two copies of whatever, a lot of other cards. So that's another reason why this would happen. And in general, like this sometimes could happen if there's a burst, right? Like the market is not fast enough to adjust to, for example, meta shifts. A good example of this is actually what happened exactly yesterday, right? So yesterday, Grand Archive announced a update to their ban and restricted announcement. They introduced a new Proxius Vault card. Effectively, this is a card that is now legal in the game. It was never printed, so you're free to go home, take your printer, print the card, attach it to paper, and that's a legal copy, right? This card changed how a different card that was printed earlier this year works. And so that card, unfortunately, overnight went from, let's say, a 25, 50-cent card to about like $3 to $4, right? So there's a supply shock, right? And of course, all the speculators come to the market and they'll look at what's available out there and say, oh, this card is out now this expensive, I'll buy 100 copies, so I'll buy 1,000, right? And they're speccing on the card, which makes sense because what they're thinking is, I'm gonna buy it for this cheap price, I will then resell it back to the market for a different price. And so effectively, you have created a situation where the expected value of a set has now just skyrocketed because the certain cards are now very popular, they're very expensive, but the market hasn't adjusted for that, right? Because let's say the market was at equilibrium, but this card is now like this, which pushes the EV of the box up like this. And then, of course, the actual sale of the normal boxes haven't adjusted upwards to kind of account for that, which is why there's an inverted expected value. This is pretty common, very, very, very normal in situations like this, right? And basically, that is the reason why inverted EV happens, right? Okay, so how long does this situation last? This is actually a really good question because a lot of times the players are saying, man, I really need that card and I can't get it. And everywhere I look, the card is now $10 instead of like last week it was like $2, right? Very common situation, especially if there's a spike in price due to meta shifts. This is pretty natural and normal, right? So if you're a player, think about it from the other perspective, right? A store has been sitting with this card for $2 and they haven't been able to sell. And had you realized this was a thing that could change everything, you could have bought it for $2. The other thing that can happen to stores is they could get wiped out. So what I often recommend to a lot of stores is set circuit breakers, right? Let's say you have 100 copies of some card. Do not list, never, ever, ever. If you're never ever list all 100 copies, right? You're punching yourself in the face by doing that because you never know what card could go up, what card could go down. And yes, I get it. It's easier. I list it. I kind of set and forget it. If it sells, it sells. True. What I would always recommend is list some copies of it, some percentage maybe of your inventory, but never all of it. And that sets a circuit breaker, which allows you to say, hey, if the card shifts in meta or people realize how good it is, it goes up, you're not going to get wiped out. And again, like let's say you're a store, you just sold 100 copies of this card now, that's now worth $4 for $1. How do you feel? And what are you going to do? Are you going to ship the card? Are you not going to ship the card? Right? This is actually a problem, right? This is a really weird situation that you're now in. And what do you do about that? So there's that. The other thing is this, like in general, inverted EV never lasts forever, okay? Because of course, like stores adjust, players adjust. As we see the situation here, I mean, unless there's actually no more product, right? Well, to be fair, if there's actually no more product, the inverted EV will not last because the booster box on this side will also go up to kind of meet the price of the new expected values, right? So that's just going to happen. So if there's no more actual products left, the booster box will go up. If there's more product available, the price of the cards should come down or they should meet somewhere in the middle where it's maybe fair. Or the other thing that often happens is the EV actually doesn't shift because a certain card goes into the meta, another card comes out of the meta. And so you kind of have like about the same price for those booster boxes, which works out okay for everybody, right? My recommendation for players, like I know it feels really bad, like you wake up in the morning, you're too late to the thing, now the card that you want, you can't get copies of, it's really annoying, right? My recommendation to the player is just be patient. Like a lot of these things, they will subside. They're not going to last forever. It's not really something that you have to worry about. You have to like fret about, whatever. Just be patient, right? Things will kind of smooth out. It'll be okay. And stores will open more products, right? I guarantee you stores are looking at, for example, what happened last night at Cosmic Bolt. Every store is looking at the situation and adjusting exactly how they order, what they're going to buy right now, right? They're not going to wait until next week. They're doing that right now. As soon as they get their product, they open the product, they're going to compete with each other, right? So everybody wants to jump into this $4 card. But because everybody wants to jump in, there's now 100 new copies on the market. That price doesn't come down to $3, $2, $2.50, whatever, $1, whatever. So again, I don't think it's going to go back to where it was because where it was a bulk card, right? Now it's going to come back up to something more reasonable of that, rarity of that card. Again, not crazy. Again, it's not going to be like $20, but it's also not going to be like exactly where it was before. Just, for set expectations properly, right? So overall, what does this all mean, right? Usually, again, when you have inverted EV, right, it's actually not a bad thing. So if you're a player and you see inverted EV, what that's telling you, or what that should tell you, is that there's a very strong player base. Players are playing the game. If they're not playing the game, they don't care, there won't be an inverted EV because who's buying the singles, right? The singles are being bought because the players are adjusting to the metagame. As the metagame shifts, they're now saying, I'm buying this card or selling this card, etc. Right? So that's number one. Number two is as that player base grows, right? And if you're like if you're a store, whatever, look, that's gonna, like rising tide lifts all ships, right? As that player base grows, as that thriving player base shifts to this meta, guess what? All the cards that are part of this deck or meta starts getting sold. So what you're going to see in the next couple of days is not only is this card going to get sold, all the, like for example, Arasana cards of this deck meta is going to start going up in price as well, because as people are kind of like experimenting, testing, figuring out exactly what to do, they're going to start seeing, hey, there's a card that's going to go up. Like, what does this all mean? What can I do with this? So again, that's going to help drive the price of these singles kind of up for the store, but also in a different way for the players. Like now you're going to see a lot of stores opening products, right? So that's the last thing. Long term, the stores are going to say, hey, like Arizana's popular, let's open more products so we have singles for players, or sell more sealed products, or import more from distribution, whatever those may be. And now it's a thriving community, a thriving cycle where, you know, a sealed product comes in, they're sold to people, sold to stores, sold to players, whatever, and players can buy them, and then they can build whatever decks. And the best part about all this, right? I know like maybe it's not something that you guys are interested in, but it's something I like and I think is actually great. And I think all the players, everybody really in the whole entire ecosystem should care about, is that this is good for the company. If the company can make money on their, you know, sales, whatever, if the company can drive prices up, right? Again, not skyrocket, not like prohibitively priced, but something more reasonable, it's good for the company because now they can sell more product, which means that they can pay their employees, hire more employees, expand the game, build more sets. So tell me why that's not a good thing, right, overall. Anyways, that's what I have to say about inverted EV, right? It exists. I recognize that sometimes it's a feel bad. But and the reason it happens is because usually meta shift or something has happened whereby it's a short-term type of thing. Just understand time-wise, it's a short-term, not a long-term thing. It will adjust, but also set expectations. Don't expect the prices of the cards to come back exactly where they were before, unless of course the card falls out of the meta. But in that case, it's probably not good anyways. But if the card doesn't fall out of meta, it will come down in price, not to where it was, but to something reasonable. So a little bit patience, it will adjust, right? In Magic, for example, this happens all the time when a new set is released. In general, we say that inverted EV period lasts about maybe, if you include the pre-sales and things like that, about a month. If you include just set release, from set release date until where this price kind of comes down, about a week. So effectively in Magic, none of these inverted EV things last even more than a week, right? So don't worry about it, be patient, you're gonna be fine. Anyways, Mark from Solar Games, I'm signing out. Stay classy. I'll see you next time.